It would be really easy to write a fasting book. And it goes like this. Step one, don't eat for a while. Step two, here's a bunch of science from PubMed that says it's good for you. And this is kind of the template for fasting. But there's a lot between those things. And I didn't want to write that book at all because it's already been written. They're actually really good books on the why of fasting. And there's enough of that in here that you see that it's of benefit. But okay, you're that first person and saying, okay, I know I'm not supposed to eat, except they never talk about what you're not supposed to eat. The real definition of fasting is going without. And you can choose what you go without. If you're on the keto diet, you're fasting from carbs. If you're on a vegan diet for some non health reason, then you might be doing it for health reasons. It just doesn't work. But you can be a vegan and you're saying, okay, I'm fasting from animal foods. And you say, I'm not going to have alcohol. You're fasting from alcohol. So there's many types of fasts, even things like, cold therapy. I'm going to fast from being warm for a little while to make myself stronger. Like there's just all sorts of things. Every one of those, the commonality is the body thinks you'll die if you take a cold shower. And it tells you that's pain, run away. But then you do it for 3 days, like, oh, I feel better. And then the body thinks you'll die if you don't eat one of the 6 meals a day you have to eat so you don't go into starvation mode. So the way you get started with fasting is just recognize that the body is going to send you a false signal, right? And there's something called hunger, which most people don't experience regularly. And there's something called cravings, which most people experience regularly. And so what's going to happen is you'll get a message and you might even say to yourself, wow, I'm starving right now. It takes 2 or 3 months to starve. That is the absolute real reality. But it feels like you're starving right now. So, one approach, and the approach that's most often visualized for fasting, is hey, you're just going to have to man up and just suck it up and walk it off and just kind of ignore that. There's just one problem. It takes willpower and energy to do that right at a time where you're doing a practice that reduces the available energy for you. So to rely on willpower when you just turn the power knob down is kind of a bad strategy. You might win some of the time, but the rest of the time, the donut sitting there at 10 a.m. is going to win. And then you're going to go, God, why am I so weak? Why did I do that? No, I'm saying this from experience being a 300-pound person who swore I was going to eat the cookie. And there's this inner dialogue that goes through, and you convince yourself, you know what? It's a good idea to have just half the cookie. And like there's some reason, and as soon as you eat it, you're like, God, why did I do that? So the first thing for someone who's brand new to fasting, okay, here's what you're going to do. Have dinner a little bit earlier than normal. You'll sleep better anyway. Don't have any snacks after dinner. And let's say you can do that 3 or 4 hours before bedtime. You just fasted for 4 hours. You sleep for, let's say, 7, 8 hours. You got 12 hours of fasting. That's the very entry level, right? It wasn't that hard. But now let's say, okay, I'm going to make it until lunchtime. So there's another 4 hours. You just did a 16-hour fast if you just wait till lunch. But the odds are that morning, if you have weight to lose like I did, or even if you don't have weight to lose, but your metabolism isn't that healthy, what do you do? And in Fast This Way, I present 3 fasting hacks, one of which has never been written about in the world of fasting. And it comes from not a purist point of view that says you can only have water during a fast. It comes from what are the benefits of fasting, what stops the benefits, and what are the things I want to feel while I'm fasting. And what I want to feel while I'm fasting is no thoughts about hunger. And I want to feel no lack of energy. And I still want all the benefits of fasting. So how do you create that endpoint? So the cost of fasting is very low in terms of your energy, but the benefits are as high or nearly as high as if you just did water only and just decided you were going to suck it up. So it's that approach that works for everyone. And suddenly like, wait, you mean I saved time on breakfast? I saved money on breakfast. I didn't suffer as a result. I think I can do this. And so the first one is, okay, have dinner a little early. And so you can get the fast in and still have normal meal times at noon and at dinner. The other 3 big fasting hacks in the book. The first one is have a cup of black coffee in the morning. And the reason for this is really fascinating. It turns out there's 2 hunger hormones that control way more of your thought process than you think. And one of them is called ghrelin. Ghrelin's the hunger hormone. It turns on hunger and desire for food. And the one that makes you feel full and sated is CCK, or cholecystokinin. And if you can bump your ketone levels up just a little bit, magically, and there are studies that show this. This is way less than full-on keto mode, but just a little bump in ketones will turn down ghrelin and turn up CCK. So the voice in your head screaming at you to eat the muffin or whatever, it just shuts up. Okay. And that is liberating. The reason coffee works is that coffee has the ability to double ketone production. This is the amount of caffeine in 2 small cups of coffee, so it doesn't take a lot. Like, medium or a large coffee is gonna do just fine. And it's also shown that caffeine is a mild appetite suppressant. So now you've got more energy because you had caffeine. And coffee, by the way, is shown in so many studies to be good for you. Like, Google the name of your favorite disease in coffee and look at the science. Like, it's the best superfood there is. And people say it's addictive. I don't know. If there was something you did every day and when you stop doing it, you feel bad, you'd be addicted, right? I'm talking about exercise. So, in fact, coffee is as important as exercise in my book. So, and if you don't like coffee, you can use tea, but you just need to get something like matcha, like a strong tea. And when you do that, it's going to suppress that appetite. It's going to give you energy. For beginning fasters, that oftentimes isn't enough. And then you go to the second fasting hack, one I'm very well known for, and I'm not here to sell this. Many people have tried bulletproof coffee, but it works during a fast. And I've been writing about this for 10 years. People have bought about 500,000 copies of my books. People have lost more than 1 million pounds on the bulletproof diet. At this point, it is very safe to say that this works. I've also talked to several experts in autophagy, this idea of when you fast, your body breaks down old, weak cells and waste products and gets rid of them. Drinking bulletproof coffee with only specific fats in it, no protein, no carbs of any form, it allows your body to stay in a fasting mode because your insulin doesn't change and because your protein digestion doesn't get turned on. So what you do is you take a little bit of butter. It can be a lot if you're starving or you're really big, but it only needs to be a teaspoon. And you take some C8 MCT oil. The bulletproof brand is Brain Octane. I'm the guy who made MCT oil famous. And you blend that in there. And several things happen with bulletproof coffee. One is when you blend the butter into the coffee itself, it changes the structure of the water in the coffee. This is not like quantum crystal structure. This is University of Washington research by Gerald Pollack. I wrote a blank check, or not a blank check, but a check without a specific protocol in mind. Said, here's $50,000, discover something about water. And Gerald went out and he said, well, I know that water in the body changes. The body actually, when you drink a cup of water, it changes by heating up water when it's near a cell membrane. Cell membranes are little droplets of fat. And once the water changes, and when I say changes, you can see it on a microscope. This is not magic water. This is, oh, look, there's a little blurry edge there. What's that? It's called exclusion zone water. Well, he found that droplets of butterfat in water create the largest exclusion zone he's ever seen. So when you blend it, and you have to blend your bulletproof coffee, and it's already heated, you're changing the structure of the water. And this matters during fasting because normally when you drink a cup of water, you have to heat the water up, which means burning some energy. And then you can use the water to fold proteins and to make more energy. But since you've already structured the water, you drink it, the body's like, oh, great, I'll just go straight to work on fast burning. I don't have to do that on fat burning. I don't have to do that first heating step. So you don't get cold and you don't have a dip in energy. That's why the Tibetans drink their yak butter tea, which was the inspiration for bulletproof coffee. We didn't know this. This is new science, hasn't even been published yet. And I saw the preprint of the publication from Dr. Pollock a couple of years after I made the donation to the university. So that's a part of it. But then the MCT oil, it raises, at least the C8 MCT, it raises ketones 4 times more than coconut oil or the cheapest, most abundant MCT oil. So the type of MCT you get really matters because the C12 or lauric acid, that doesn't do anything special different than corn oil for raising ketones. And coconut oil, if you have a tablespoon of that, it's the same as fasting for 8 hours. But if you have the C8 MCT, you get 4 times more ketones. So what you've done now in that little cup of coffee that was creamy and delicious, you didn't damage your fast. You gave yourself water you can immediately use to generate ATP and burn more fat. And you gave yourself ketones, which trains your cells to become fat burning machines. And if you do this on a regular basis, all of the cells in your body are like, oh, I can always burn fat, or I can burn carbohydrates or protein or whatever. but it's a very different thing, and it's pretty cool.
So let me just jump in here real quick, Dave. So you're saying for somebody who's a total newbie, you said a few different things here. You said cutting dinner, stopping eating after dinner, and maybe eating a little bit earlier, and then going to bed.
Yep.
Number 2, having coffee, and then number 3 is having the bulletproof coffee. So for the newbie, by what you're explaining here, it sounds like the bulletproof coffee is going to be the easiest way to begin fasting. So do what you said in step 1, eat a little earlier, don't eat in the morning, have a bulletproof coffee, and we got to get to step 3 though. Talk about what the third aspect is there.
So if you just do those two, most people, they sail through a fast and the most magic thing happens. 10 a.m. comes around, 10:30, when everyone is having their morning snack and going to the vending machine, or the pastries and whatever. You look at it, and instead of doing what I would always do, which is, okay, I'm just going to take a deep breath. Maybe I'll have some beef jerky. I'm going to look away. You just look at it like, I don't want it. The freedom of just not desiring junk food is really big the first time you feel it. I know that bulletproof coffee does that just from hundreds of thousands of people. And then the final thing, which is new to the world of fasting and really belongs here, is called prebiotic fiber. And I wrote about that in Superhuman, the book that you haven't read, because getting soluble fiber that you can't digest, but that your good gut bacteria eat, it is shown in hundreds of studies to make you live longer. And it also causes you to grow a lot more species of good gut bacteria. So when bacteria eat prebiotic fiber, they make short chain fatty acids that are ketogenic. So what that means is you put a scoop or two of prebiotic fiber in, and now you have a drink that has no digestible carbohydrates. So it doesn't raise your blood sugar at all. It doesn't have any protein, so it's not causing your liver to start making enzymes for digestion. Those enzymes can go to fixing your body. And soluble fiber like that, or prebiotic fiber, it dramatically lowers hunger. So if you put that in there, there is no one on earth with that combination. You drink that, you're going to be hungry afterwards. So now all of a sudden, like, wait a minute, I get the benefits of fasting and I just don't care about food. And the first day you do this, here's the benefit that is amazing. I found a study in Fast This Way that shows that for the average person, this doesn't mean the average obese person, it's just the average person, 15% of the thoughts in their head every day are about what's for my next meal. When you turn down ghrelin and you turn up CCK, you get 15% of the thoughts in your head back. Because when noon comes around and all your colleagues get up to go to lunch, or the kids come and pest you, or whatever the deal is now that you're probably working from home, you look, oh, I guess I could eat. Okay. Those are words I have never said in my life when I was obese, because it was like, okay, I got 15 more minutes and then it's taco time. And like, you're really focused on it. So you get that focus back, right? So those are the big 3 fasting hacks from Fast This Way. And there's a lot about the mental and cognitive and the different things for men and women. There's a chapter for women. But if you just get started with that, a slightly earlier dinner, and if you fail on that, that's okay. Just wake up, replace breakfast with either black coffee, or bulletproof coffee with soluble fiber or prebiotic fiber. The brand that I make is called Inner Fuel for Bulletproof. You don't have to buy any of my bulletproof stuff. It just works better because I designed it that way. So I'm not here to sell you. Will not change my life if every listener buys bulletproof or doesn't. I just made it because I thought it needed to be made and that it matters. The primary ingredients in the soluble prebiotic fiber are basically sap from trees that feed the good guys in your gut. There's acacia gum, there's guar gum that's hydrolyzed, there's larch or beta-galactan and other ingredients like that. But I looked at the most studied ones and I put them together. And all that's, bulletproof Inner Fuel. Bulletproof Brain Octane is the C8 oil, and the bulletproof coffee beans don't have toxins in them. And I will warn you, if you drink a cup of cheap black coffee, even if it's from a major chain, in the US, we don't have any laws about the mold toxin level in coffee. So when it's illegal to sell coffee in China, Japan, or Europe, they will send it to the US and we'll drink it. So if you drink a cup of coffee and then you get a severe sugar craving, you have to pee, but your bladder's not full, and you feel like you want to punch someone, it wasn't the coffee. It was the stuff that grew on the coffee while it was being processed. And if that happens, some of the supplements I talk about that you can take during a fast may help you. But drinking coffee that makes you hungry is a bad idea. So if you notice that, switch to a different coffee.
So one thing I noticed reading the new book, something I hadn't heard you talk about before was this soluble fiber, adding that into a bulletproof coffee. And you've broken down what that is, and it's not a product I've tried, but I'm now curious. I'm gonna have to give it a whirl. But does it change the taste of the coffee at all? Or does it add something granular in there so when you're sipping your coffee, it's not the same?
Most people are used to like a metamucil sawdust kind of fiber. When you think about fiber, like blah. Now those are bulk fibers, different animal. What we're talking about here is something that dissolves into the water. It has an extremely neutral taste. Most people can't tell it's in coffee. It might have I mean, if you're a super taster, you might find like a very slight shift, but it still tastes like a latte. And that's important to me. Like, you don't want to ruin your coffee. You want the flavor of the coffee to come through. So butter is the same fat as milk. In fact, everyone who's tried bulletproof coffee made properly is like, oh, this is surprisingly delicious. I like this. When you add inner fuel, you usually, if you give it to someone, they can't tell it's in there. And now the FDA recommends, I think, 20 or 30 grams of soluble fiber every day for longevity, for health. The FDA has always said at minimum to not die of deficiency. I now, after writing Superhuman and measuring my gut bacteria, I have the number of species of gut bacteria present that a much younger person has. As you age, you have less species in your gut. And I was able to quadruple the number of species because I started adding that to my bulletproof coffee. You can also add it to any meal to make yourself full. And this is another thing that's important. If you eat a dinner that has stuff that triggers cravings in it, when you wake up the next morning, the first thought on your mind will be food, and you'll have that kind of like a crampy feeling in your stomach. Like, I got to eat right now. That means you ate something that wasn't compatible with you. But when you add a scoop of this prebiotic fiber to whatever kind of to your salad dressing, to whatever sauce, it just disappears. You can't tell it's in there. And you can pour some brain octane on there as well, which raises ketones. Most people sleep better when they do that because they're more satiated.
And during a fast, obviously, we're not going to have any food in our system, any glucose, any sugar. But I'm just curious, kind of as a side note, when you use the brain octane and you do have carbohydrates in your system, do you still produce ketones?
100%. Brain octane is the best selling source of exogenous ketones. It comes into the body, and in one step, the body converts it into beta hydroxybutyrate, whether or not you just ate a cheesecake. And if you take something like a ketone salt or a ketone ester, both of those require one step of conversion. If it's a salt, your kidneys have to pull out all the metals that are bound to the BHB. And if it's an ester, your liver has to do the work. But brain octane is the most natural form. It's found in mother's milk, and it doesn't create the load on the liver or the load on the kidneys that come from other sources of exogenous ketones. That's one of the reasons that I don't sell other forms of ketones at Bulletproof, just because I was ready to start selling a ketone salt, which is a way to dramatically raise ketones. But a guy who studied with Hans Krebs, who spent 40 years studying ketosis, I was the last guy to interview him before he passed, straight up said, in my laboratory, I am 100% convinced that ketone salts cause mitochondrial damage. So I pulled the product before I shipped it.
Wow. When was that?
Oh, maybe 4 years ago, I'm guessing. I have a poor sense of time in the past, but his name is Dr. Veach. He was a fan of esters, but there's a whole nother group of research that shows that deesterification creates a heavy load on the liver. So if you wanted to source a way to raise your ketones every single day without pushing liver or kidneys beyond what you want them to do every day, brain octane is the only game in town, as far as I can tell. And I'd be very happy to make those other products. In fact, I synthesized ketone esters. It was $40,000 to make a kilo of them way back in 2013, and I just was like, nah, I don't think it's the right path. So there's debate on this, to be perfectly honest, but there's a lot of MLM companies pushing ketone salts. When you're fasting for long periods of time, your ketone levels tend to go up and up and up as your body starts burning more fat. But the trick is, when you first start fasting, if you're not used to this and you haven't already tried keto and things like that, your cells don't know how to burn fat. You have these little, the mitochondria, it's easiest to call them power plants. They're actually environmental sensors that make energy, hormones, and other chemicals that control your body. They're sort of the puppet masters. They're configured to only eat sugar and a little bit of protein. And if you have ketones present over time, they're like, oh, I guess I should reconfigure myself so that I can also burn fat. And now you have metabolic flexibility. And if you go like keto, bro, I'm never eating a carb again, then they stop having their ability to burn sugar, which is not a good idea. At least they turn it way down. So what I want is cells that can just as easily eat fat as eat carbohydrates. And when you do that, you have a much more resilient metabolism and you're likely to live longer as a result.
And you talk about in the book what that would look like is maybe fasting during the week, doing intermittent fasting, and then Saturday and Sunday having like a gluten-free waffle with the family. And that's kind of how I operate. I do intermittent fasting throughout the week, and then on weekends I'm open to going out for a nice healthy brunch or making a gluten-free pancake with the family at home, and I find that works really well. So again, I just want to hammer home the point you're making there about you don't want to just run on fat. You want to be able to run on fat and then be able to switch and run on sugar too, and that's the sweet spot.
Yeah. There's something that's in the book. I call it the fasting trap, but it's a human condition. There's a vegan trap that I fell into. There's a keto trap that I've definitely experienced, and then there's the fasting trap. And these traps all work the same way. And it goes like this. Actually, there's also an exercise trap. Now that I think about it, I am going to take on a new behavior that I have convinced myself is going to make positive changes. I do the behavior and I see the changes. So when I was a raw vegan, like, wow, okay, I'm getting a ton of energy. Now I didn't understand why I was getting energy. It wasn't for a good reason. But and then same thing with keto. I feel so good. Same thing with intermittent fasting. I am never eating breakfast again. I feel so much better. Like my focus is better. I mean, people are so amazed at how much better they feel by not having breakfast. But then after about 4 to 6 weeks, you are 100% convinced this is the way. Why would I ever go back to the crappy thing I did before? But then something starts to go wrong because the body doesn't like a steady state. It likes cycles and it likes being able to switch in and out. So after 4 to 6 weeks, something isn't quite right. And you go, oh, it's probably because I'm keto, but I ate, 18 grams of carbs. I'm going to go down to 12 grams of carbs. I'm going to be even more keto, right? And then it still isn't working and you're plateaued and you've lost 50 of the 100 pounds. By the way, that happened to me in the 90s. I tried the Atkins diet. Couldn't lose the second 50, but the first 50 sure did come off fast. So you end up going deeper and deeper, following a path that you know works, even though it's no longer working. And then if you do the vegan thing, same thing. Like, why am I cold all the time? Why am I getting autoimmunity? Why is my bone density going down? Why do my teeth hurt? All that stuff. Well, it's because you did it for too long. And with fasting, what I find is regularly, and this is based on 10 years of interacting with people on the bulletproof diet, people doing bulletproof intermittent fasting. And women hit the wall first. And what it looks like when a woman doesn't break their fasts or break her fasts um, often enough, and just says, okay, first I started skipping breakfast. Now I'm going down to one meal a day. I'm just going to have dinner because I feel so good. I'm losing weight. Like I'm liberated. I love my brain. Well, the first thing that happens is they wake up in the morning and go, I feel like I didn't sleep very well. Like I kind of feel a bit hungover. I wonder what's going on here. And then weird, I have relatively normal cycles, but it's not working right this month. And then you get hair thinning. And the answer for that is going to sound really straightforward. Have some breakfast already and have some carbs, right? You do not have to be in keto to do what I talk about in Fast This Way. It's totally optional. You can have carbs every night if you want to. And this is about timing and type of food. And when you do this, um, especially as a woman, if you have weight to lose and you want to do this for long term, it really helps to start out doing it 3 or 4 days a week. So maybe Wednesday, I'm going to have breakfast, but I'm not going to have cereal. I'm going to have protein and I'm going to have fat for breakfast and I'm going to have my carbs at dinner. And that helps you with sleep. And that also lets the body know, oh, I'm in an area where there is enough food, right? So sometimes I go without, sometimes I go with. But if you convince those little sensors in your body, they're not very smart, they're bacteria. So you convince them that, okay, I'm in a land where there really is enough food because I never get to eat except maybe once a day. They start turning on cellular stressors like cortisol and adrenaline. And you wake up at 3 in the morning and you have racing thoughts and you wonder what's going on. All of that's hackable. And the answer is have some breakfast already or have some carbs. So for women who want to do this sustainably, start out with 3 or 4 days a week, do the fasting hacks and Fast This Way because they at least give you energy availability, even if it's not carbohydrates. And that tends to avoid the wall. The wall for men when you over fast, saying, okay, I'm just doing one meal a day forever. Or maybe, every week I'll do a 48-hour fast and a bunch of 24-hour fasts. And it's really common. People are like, I feel so good. I had to buy new pants. Like, this is it. Well, what happens first is sleep quality goes down. And when I did this back when I was testing the limits of the bulletproof diet, back in like 2010, 2011, before I first published it, I did 3 months of one serving of broccoli a day. I mean, I was very, very low carb. And what happened was my sleep monitoring stuff showed that I was waking up 12 times a night without knowing it. And I would wake up in the morning feeling like I didn't sleep. And then predictably for men, and this usually starts at 6 to 8 weeks, not at the 4 to 6 weeks for women, you wake up and you don't have the normal morning kickstand that most guys have in the morning. And then, so sleep quality goes down, hormone changes, and then hair thinning. So you don't have, just because it's good doesn't mean more is better. When I weighed 300 pounds, I said, oh, I'm going to work out because I know that's going to, burn extra calories. By the way, that doesn't work at all. But working out is like 10% of how you look. But what I found was that after 18 months of working out 6 days a week, 90 minutes per session, half weights, half cardio, wearing a weighted vest, walking on the treadmill at an angle and all that kind of stuff, um, I was overtrained and I still weighed 300 pounds. So you can say exercise is good, but I will tell you, heavy exercise every day will wreck your life. Right. And some people, especially if you're very young, you're like, well, Dave, I can handle a vegan diet. I can handle exercise every day. I mean, you can also handle a life of pizza and beer and staying out until 2 every morning. It's because you have a lot of energy when you're young, but you're burning it up and you actually want to conserve that for all of your life. And this is part of the wisdom of fasting that says the right dose is very helpful. The wrong dose of too much is no better than too little. So we want to be in the Goldilocks zone for exercise. We want to be there for all of the things that we do in life. And even things like cortisol, the stress hormone, it's bad. You should have no cortisol. People with low cortisol hate their lives because they get sick all the time. Right? So you need cortisol. You just don't need too much or too little. So all of these are about setting up cycles and waves in your life where you go to the upper healthy limit and you go to the lower healthy limit and you tell the body, you better be strong enough to go within these normal limits. And then for brief periods of time, you go, we're going to blow the limit out. And then the body goes, oh my God, I might have to survive in a world where there's no food for all of 24 hours. And then it takes a hard look at itself. This is all automated systems and goes, which parts of me can't do that? Oh, this tiny fraction of cells, they're the weak ones. I thought I could let them run because I didn't think they were weak. But now that I know the environment might have occasional food shortages, I'm just going to go out and execute, remove all of these weak cells, and I'm going to grow fresh, young, strong ones. And that's that process of autophagy I talked about before. And it'll do it for the power plants, the mitochondria in the cells, and it'll do it for whole cells. And it's powerfully anti-aging to do this. But if instead you just go into straight up starvation mode, it doesn't work. In starvation mode, it's fine if you do a 4-day fast. And under medical supervision, you can go 40, 50, up to 70 days if you really have a lot of weight to lose or you're dying of some kind of condition. But what you want to do here is just show the body that it's not regularly starving, but it could happen. So it better be ready. And those are the key words, better be ready, because that is the core definition of resilience. A resilient human can turn on masses of energy throughout the body in a second's notice at any time. And this is why the other practices that I mentioned in the book, like fasting from heat for brief periods. Oh, you mean I might have to make all the cells in my body turn on heat rapidly? The ones that can't do that, those are the ones to target and upgrade. And same thing. Oh, I might have to actually be able to function without food for 18 hours or 24 hours. Well, the cells that can't do that, they're clearly not suitable. Let's get better ones. And what you end up with is a brain that works way better whether or not you eat. You end up with a metabolism that doesn't get massive blood sugar spikes when you do eat carbohydrates. You end up without diabetes. You end up with a much lower risk of cancer, heart disease. And what did it cost you to do this? Okay. You didn't have to suffer the way you thought a fast was going to. So there was no energy like, oh, I had to feel like crap every morning for a long time. No, that's not real. Right. You didn't have to buy or make breakfast. You might use the fasting hacks, which are going to cost you $1 or $2, but I guarantee it was cheaper and faster than what you do now for breakfast. Right. So you save money, you save time, you got more energy, and you're going to live longer and you're not going to die suffering. And this is the highest ROI thing. That's why I wrote a book about it. It's so important.
Well, Dave, throughout our chat here, you've talked about a number of the different benefits, the autophagy, and you just named off a bunch of different things, cancer and heart health, and you've named a bunch of different stuff. But just to make sure we're all on the same page here, can you talk about any other major benefits people are going to get from fasting that we haven't talked about?
Well, there are four things most likely to kill you if you just do the math. Okay. And it's not COVID. It is number one is diabetes. Look at the number of people who are dying from diabetes or diabetes complications. Number two is cardiovascular disease. Number three is cancer. Number four is Alzheimer's. If you can dodge those four bullets, the quality of your life in the last 20 years will be very good because you'll know your own name. There'll be no tubes, no wheelchairs, and no diapers. Okay. Like people think of getting old. That's the picture they have now, which is a completely distorted picture of reality. The real way healthy people get old is you actually develop wisdom. You finally dealt with all of your crap and you have enough energy to help other people with the wisdom that you've accumulated. So we need our village elders back and we need them to be healthy and high powered. And the people who practice intermittent fasting now, however old they are, whether they're starting in their 60s or 70s, and there's tons of people doing that, or whether they're starting as 18-year-olds and saying, I'm going to do this, they are the ones who are going to be shining balls of energy and wisdom when they're 80 and 90 and 100. And because the cost of this is less than having breakfast and the energy you have is more than when you had breakfast, this is a sustainable practice for decades because it actually works better and it's pleasant.
Well, I think a big part of it too is you can talk to people about all the different benefits they're going to have later in life. But it's easy enough for any of us to say, that won't happen to me, or I'm doing this, this, and this. I'm going to be healthy when I get older. But the great thing about fasting is you get the benefits in the moment, the energy, the mental alertness, and you're getting those other benefits that are going to be, preventing all those diseases down the line as well.
In fact, can we talk about the F words from the book?
Sure, let's get into them.
All right. This is something that came to me after I wrote Headstrong. This was my like monthly science bestseller list. One of the proudest moments in my life was Homo Deus and Sapiens are some of my favorite books. And Headstrong was sandwiched between those on the monthly science book best. And I was like, I'm so honored as a reasonable author. That was to me a major honor. In that book, I talk in detail about exactly where you were just going with that, just about all of the different benefits of what happens in your brain. And it happens because of mitochondria. And after I published the book, I finally kind of woke up from a dream. I'm like, oh, I've got it. My undergrad degree is in a form of artificial intelligence. We called it decision support systems back when I studied, and I studied information systems. And I spent the first half of my career as a computer hacker, figuring out how to manage millions of computers at the same time. It's a very similar mindset to managing what happens inside your body. So each little unit of energy production and monitoring, these mitochondria, they have to follow the rules of life because they are bacteria that became a part of our system. So if you were to design something that was going to live forever as a species, it has to have some behaviors that are very easy to do and very simple because a little bacteria or a mold spore or a frog, there isn't a lot of mental processing capacity and it has to be inside a cell. So what we're seeing is tiny rules repeated forever. Here's the tiny rules that drive us and drive everything alive, whether it's a plant or an animal. Number one, run away from, kill, or hide from scary things. You put 10 times more energy and focus on that, even if it just might kill you because you don't know. And if something kills a life form, then it can't reproduce the species, right? So that's fear. And it gets 10 times more focus. Your body will stop processing food and focus on using energy and looking around and being reactive, and it'll steal your focus. The second F word that all life has to do to stay alive is eat everything because food or feeding, it's so important. Famines have killed everything that's ever been alive in much of history. So we know without having to think, we know in our bones, eat the bagel. Because if you don't, the species could die. Okay, it's not true, but it doesn't matter because the feeling comes from the tissues. And then the next F word that all life forms would have to do to stay around forever, you read the book, you know what it is.
Fertility?
I love it that you didn't just go straight for a 4-letter F word. So nice
I know
job,
where you're
Jesse.
going.
So it's fertility. And that gets about 3 times more focus than it really needs. In that we want to have love in our lives. And we really do feel like if we're not having sex regularly as adults, like something's wrong, something's deeply wrong. And it's because our cells are telling us if you don't make babies, then the species will die. Now, all of those are untrue statements. Most of the time, what you're afraid of is not going to kill you. Okay. If it's a tiger, yes. But if it's your boss yelling at you, no. Right? Most of the time, you feel like you're going to starve, but you have a couple months before you starve. It doesn't feel that way, but you do. And if you don't go on that date with that really hot person that you know is bad for you, you're not going to die either. It just feels like you're going to die. Right? So all of these are driving everything we've ever done that we're ashamed of. And the benefits of fasting are teaching yourself that it's safe to go without. What I discovered and what is there in Fast This Way is I had been taught as a young obese person, if you don't eat 6 meals a day, you'll go into starvation mode, which is death. Okay. And I believe that because that's what all the health experts said, which is nuts. And I also knew that when I was hungry, I would get hypoglycemic. Like I would yell at the people I liked. I would just get angry and shaky, and I would not act in a way that I respected. So I was afraid of being a jerk, and I was afraid of being hungry. And at the same time, I realized from other personal development stuff, I was afraid of being alone. So I hired a shaman and said, I want you to drop me off in a cave with no humans and no food for 4 days. And I'm just going to have to deal with my issues. And that isn't the way most people go about their work. But for me, it's like if I recognize that I have a trigger, I'm just going to hold the trigger down until I get done with it. And I've since developed other technologies to help remove triggers without having to just go feel the pain for 4 days. But I write about that experience both biologically, but psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually, because fasting has always been paired with spiritual practices throughout all of history. And the reason it's been paired is that when you fast for 2 days, you go into ketosis. And when you have those ketones, the same ones that come from MCT oil, when you have those ketones present in your brain, you have more energy in the neurons than you normally do. And that provides you the extra energy to go within and do the awareness work. So, what you get as a person of any age who decides you're going to start any form of fasting, and there's many fasting for things that aren't food in Fast This Way, you get a sense of peace and a sense of power because what you thought was going to kill you loses its power. And you can sit there and say, you know, I'm perfectly fine sitting at this dinner with a bunch of people eating whatever they're going to eat with nothing on my plate. And I'm okay. Right now, they might lose it. I've witnessed that lots of times. People are like, you're going to die. Are you okay? Do you have an eating disorder? What's going on? You're like, no, I'm just fasting now. Like, I'm going to eat tomorrow. Right. But it just blows people's minds. But that fear thing, man, it drives so much because right now, when we're hungry, we trigger fear. So all of a sudden, we went from our normal hunger, which is 5 times more attention than it deserves. Now we've got 10 times more attention because we're afraid of being hungry. And fasting removes that 10x trigger because you're no longer afraid of being hungry. You're like, oh, hunger means I guess I should eat in the next while, but if I don't eat, I'll be okay. So then there's a sense of calm and a sense of peace, whether or not you've got food. And when you turn down that 10x trigger and you turn down that 5x trigger, what you end up with is abundant extra capacity in your brain to do what you're actually here to do. And what you're here to do is the fourth F word that I haven't mentioned yet. All life does this. The fourth F word is friend. Every species on the planet cooperates with other species or with itself. That's why we have kombucha. That's why we have yogurt. That's why we have forests. That's why we have herds of deer. And that's why we have tribes of people and why we specialize, why we support our community, why we take care of our elders, why we take care of our children, why we are wired to help each other. Now, if we're in fear mode and hunger mode, it's a lot harder to focus on that fourth F word because it basically gets about a 1 or a 1.5x attention. It's very hard to focus on that when we're afraid. So, what's going on here is not that we've chosen this priority, it's that it is wired into the inner parts of every cell in your body, and that Though they act based on the limited information that's available in your elbow or your liver or your eyeball, and it all rolls up, and eventually it makes it through our nervous system to our prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain responsible for logic. And there's 7 layers of filters that strip out all kinds of stuff that we never get to see, and we get to see the teeny tiny tip of what's left. But when you do this thing that's in the definition of biohacking, when I created the field of it, the definition is the art and science of changing the environment around you and inside of you so that you have full control of your own biology. What I'm proposing here is that by intermittent fasting, you're changing the environment inside of you biologically, which gives you more energy, which allows you to change the environment inside of you from your software perspective, from your thoughts and your feelings, and to sort out hunger versus anger versus fear, and to get on top of those. And I promise you, for someone who's listening to this, who's 20 years old, you master this. Yes, you have more energy now. Yes, you grew abs. Yes, you like your life better. But the other benefit there is you actually own your stuff more quickly and with less work than it would be if you just kept eating whatever you're going to eat 6 times a day.
I guess the question I have, I want to come back to what we talked about early on, having the bulletproof coffee as a way to kind of ease into an intermittent fast. You talked about the benefits you get doing that, but you also talked about what a purist fast would be, which is just having water. So, are there differences in benefits going from a purist fast and, dealing with the pain other than the psychological? You're naturally going to have psychological pain to deal with and push through and work through, which is going to help you grow, not having doing a purist fast versus, not having that pain and that craving. Other than that, is there any physiological differences in the benefits you get when you include the bulletproof coffee versus just going straight on water?
There are a few, and this is a matter of great debate. So, a lot of the studies on fasting involve mice. Mice don't have espresso machines, they get water. So, they say, we prove that a water only fast does this. Therefore, you should water only fast. And the people who take that approach, I kind of call them the hair shirt fasters. You know what a hair shirt is?
No.
There's a weird sect of Catholicism sometime 500 years ago. Monks would weave shirts out of human hair because it was extra itchy. And they would wear these itchy shirts all day long because they were bad and they had to suffer and remind themselves of how sinful they were. And then they would self-flagellate, they'd whip themselves on their back, just like, you know, I'm going to suffer here. It is acceptable to choose the hard path. However, if you're not in a place to do a spiritual fast where you want to do the hard fast, to force yourself to do the hard path when you had other things to show up for, like your family and your career and the world around you, I think it's doing disservice to yourself. So a lot of the water fasting stuff is like, well, that's what the mice did. So I'm just going to do it. I just interviewed someone on Bulletproof Radio who for 30 years has been leading people through water only fasts, medically supervised without even salt, but they do 2 lab tests a day to make sure your electrolytes are right. And I asked him, well, why water only? Like, why wouldn't you take the stuff that would reduce the oozing stuff that comes out of people's skin when you do that? He goes, well, we don't know what it'll do, so we just do it with what we know works. Now, as a biohacker, I'm like, look, I'm going to choose to suffer less and get the results. So if you do a water only fast, my recommendation, and those of many people out there, is at least have some electrolytes. There's great electrolyte formulas out there. There's this element stuff. You can just do a pinch of sea salt. You can take potassium. And I talk about different minerals you might want to take during a fast. And these are for shorter fasts. I mean, if you're going to do a very long fast, you want to medically monitor it. So if you do only water, that flies in the face of what just about every spiritual tradition ever has done. They always drink at least herbal tea or regular tea during a fast because it seems to make it work better. And the reason for that is the polyphenols, the colored compounds in colored plants. They feed the good guy bacteria called Bacteroidetes. People who are thin have more of those and less Firmicutes, which is another species more abundant in fat people. So since you're not feeding the Firmicutes, if you feed some polyphenols to these things, they actually like it and you get more of the good guys. So there's a benefit to that. But on a water only fast, it may allow the gut to rest more. People who are doing a microbiome reset where they want to basically kill off most of the stuff in their gut to allow something else to emerge. These are people with cancer and diabetes and people who are going to do a long-term water fast. There you wouldn't want to have the prebiotic fiber, for instance, because you want nothing to grow. You're kind of, just saying we're going to go down to almost no gut bacteria, and then we're going to reestablish flora. So that's an interesting perspective on it. But in terms of the benefits of doing a water only intermittent fast versus having coffee, the coffee is going to give you better results. You'll actually have a more successful fast with more fat burning, less hunger, more of everything. Now, if you want to go for the bulletproof coffee, what you'll find is that it makes it very easy to work your way into fasting because it teaches the body, oh, there's going to be ketones present, therefore you should re-architect yourself to burn fat. There are a few people out there who will just stand up and say, oh, it's not really fasting because it has calories. The thing that matters though is there carbohydrate metabolism? No. Is there protein metabolism? No. Those are the things that break a fast. So might you lose weight faster on a water only fast? We don't have great evidence either way. You might. However, you might not because your body doesn't go into fat burning mode as quickly. So I have, just after 10 years of this and with millions of people trying bulletproof, I'll tell you that it works. I cannot tell you that it works better than water only fasting, but I can tell you that you suffer less and that you will very soon learn when you make your bulletproof coffee. I actually don't. I only need like a teaspoon of MCT. It's like, I've got it this morning. I just don't want it. And someone who's like, I'm just going to have coffee, right? Almost no one listening is going to say, oh, I actually today just don't want coffee. 90% of people drink coffee. Coffee is just a well-established superfood. And there are people who say, oh, but coffee's addictive. I don't want to be addicted to anything. I'm like, do you exercise every day? They go, yeah. Great. What happens if you don't exercise for 3 days? And they say, I don't feel as good. Like, then you're addicted to exercise. You should stop. So that's my take on coffee during fasting. You probably want to do it or tea at a minimum.
Well, let's come back to your story with the shaman and the Vision Quest. Let's go back to 2008. You brought that up quickly, but this is a time when you did a water only fast. So let's come back to that time and talk about where you were at in your life and what made you want to do this.
Well, I had been through. I'd stayed in a bad relationship for a lot longer than I should have. I had made and lost $6 million. I had struggled with my weight for years and tested every diet out there and really already gotten deep on the biology. I had been diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia. I had high risk of stroke and heart attack on labs before I was 30. I had arthritis since I was 14. So my biology wasn't working that well. But I was pretty pissed off all the time too. So I'm like, I've got some work to do here. And as an engineer, I'm like, why do I make choices that are clearly stupid? Like there has to be something else going on in there. So I did all the stuff that's supposed to work. And then I'm like, okay, I didn't lose the weight. I'm not happy. I tried fame when I was 22, 23. I sold the first thing ever sold over the internet before it was even called e-commerce. I had my picture in Entrepreneur Magazine. I'm, double extra large t-shirt, red pimply face, the whole 9 yards. And that didn't make me happy to be well known for a brief period. And then I made a bunch of money when I was 26. And I looked at a friend at this company. We held Google's first servers when it was two guys and two computers. And this was a company that became worth $36 billion. And I was a co-founder of a part of the company. And I looked at my friend and said, I'll be happy when I have 10 million, when I had $6 million at 26. Okay. That is the biggest douchebag comment I think I've ever made, although I've made many. But I felt it was real at the time. And many people at the company did too. And I'm like, wait a minute. If I can't be happy with $6 million, fame isn't going to make me happy. Money isn't going to make me happy. Right. So why am I not happy here? And I started working on that. And that was a much harder thing. And that led me to South America, to Peru. I did ayahuasca with a shaman before ayahuasca was even well known. I went down there and they're like, "Do you want to do what?" I said, "No, that's for local people. Like Dave, you're white. You'll throw up. You won't like it. You shouldn't do this." And I did it anyway. And I went on this path of like understanding why I would do the things I would do that I didn't choose to do, because I kind of thought I was a meat robot. And my path has been discovering, wow, there's a lot going on below the neck here. And some of it is biological, in fact, more than we think. But a lot of it is also the software. It's our belief systems. It's our patterns where, oh, if this pattern happens in our life, it triggers this emotion because our body determined without our permission that something was happening that wasn't real. And that was what led me to that awareness. And I said, all right, I know I've got this fear of being alone. And I know that the idea of being hungry brings me anxiety because I don't want to be a jerk anymore. And because I don't I don't want to go into starvation mode. I don't want to be even fatter. Like I've struggled for years with not being fatter. Every time you kind of hang your head and go, I'm gonna have to get out my fat pants again. I wonder what I did wrong. It's so disheartening. And I wanted to get on top of those emotions because I realized the emotions were driving me more than I thought. And by putting myself in a situation that I couldn't escape, that was really pushing my buttons. I remember I had a protein bar and I was like, I'm just gonna have this just in case I need it. And I had it in my backpack. And right before I went out there, I was like, no, and I just left it on the kitchen table at the with the I know very well I would have eaten that thing if I had it.
What were some of the most profound experiences you had during that 4 days?
Man, you go through these things. I did experience really strong hunger on the second day, but I just realized how much fear was driving me. There's a time, in the middle of the night, I heard this rustling, and I'm in a cave. The cave is called First Woman. It's shaped like a giant vagina, and the local indigenous people, for them, that's where Adam and Eve first emerged onto the planet. So this is a place that's been used for ceremony for 10,000 years. And there's blackened walls with soot on them, and so I asked for permission to be there. And it was strange because having grown up in the desert, I know about predators, I know about rattlesnakes, and things like that. So I put a bunch of brush at the entrance to the cave, so if something larger wants to come in, this is a way all humans have protected themselves. It's like an alarm system. So I wake up in the middle of the night going, "Oh my god, like there's something rustling in there," like kind of losing. I get out my flashlight and I can't see anything, and like heart's pounding, and I can't go back to sleep, and I'm just like worrying, worrying, worrying. And the next night, same thing. I'm kind of freaking out, and finally I figure it out because I put the brush out there. A nocturnal bird, had started nesting in the brush, and it was making noise. And I'm like, "Wait a minute! I lost my what uh, twice over a little tiny bird." And it was such a metaphor for I'm losing my mind over hunger. I'm losing my mind over all these other things I believe to be true that have no basis in reality. So this is called a spiritual fast. And what I'm doing in Fast This Way is I'm bringing spirituality back into the practice of fasting. And what I decided for the first time is that I put thousands of hours into writing a book because like if half a million people are going to read a book and they're all going to use 10 hours to read it, that's half a million times 10, whatever that's 5 million hours. I don't know how many human lifetimes is, but that's a lot. So if I write a book that wasn't worth their time, I'm kind of a mass murderer. So I really care about that. But then I realized I was a teacher for 5 years at the University of California, but I wasn't teaching the book. So I'd write the textbook, but there wasn't like the course to go with it. So people who buy the book, you send me a receipt at Fast This Way, and I'm teaching the book for 2 weeks, and I'm leading people through the fast with hacks. We're going to do a fast without them, but the final 2 days is actually a spiritual fast where you can fast for just the morning, or you can do a 24-hour or a 48-hour fast if you want to. But along the way, to do the personal development work that comes with actually sitting with your hunger and actually feeling what's going on and going within, but going within when you have less noise from digestion and more energy from having ketones. And when you do that, that's when the real awareness happens. Like, what is my relationship with hunger? And that's different than my relationship with food. Maybe you eat because you're bored. Maybe you eat because you're lonely. I actually did both. Maybe there's no emotional component. It's just because you have these intense cravings because you're eating the wrong foods that cause cravings. But you become aware of that, and you also become aware of, you feel more grounded, you feel more connected with the world around you. And those are things that are very precious around fasting. I just promise you that if you're intermittent fasting on Monday morning and you have a job, that's not where you're going Monday morning, but you still want the fast. So there's two flavors of fasting and they're both important.
I want to come back to the cave, and you talked about ayahuasca and having that experience beforehand. I don't know how many years before.
That was probably 5 or 6 years. Yeah.
Okay. That would have, I'm assuming, been a profoundly spiritual experience, along with doing the water fast for 4 days, that being a profoundly spiritual experience. So can you kind of compare and contrast the two of them and talk about some similarities and differences?
There are many many different ways to reach altered states. And you've read my book, Game Changers, where I've interviewed 500 people who've done big things in the world. What do you guys all agree on? One of the laws that I'm like, what if I study meta gurus? I don't want to follow one guru. I want to find what they all agree on, and I'll do that because I'm lazy. And one of the rules was get out of your head, right? And fasting is a tried and true way, especially on a longer fast for longer than usually 36 hours or so. You start just kind of getting a little bit floaty, right? That's one way to do it, but it's relatively gentle unless you're going to do a long fast. Then you really start, if you're meditating and fasting, like during a fasting vipassana or some of the practices in caves and all, you can go to very deep places. Ayahuasca, it kind of kicks you there really quickly. And it's a different place than you go from a spiritual fast. You're using a different agent. You're activating DMT in the brain, which gets activated when you're born and when you die. And so you definitely see stuff that you aren't going to see except during a very intense fast. I've also done a lot of holotropic breathing, and I've written about that in some of my books. Some of the places I'll go during the 40 years of Zen advanced neurofeedback training that I do. Um, I have seen more, intense spiritual stuff from neurofeedback and holotropic breathing than I did from ayahuasca or fasting. But they're all in that same quadrant of the map around spiritual practices where you develop awareness of yourself, and you probably see stuff that you can't rationally account for. And if you are rational about it, you just realize the universe is way more interesting than you believed it to be. And this is where a lot of cutting edge neuroscience is going. And certainly where I'm going with my neuroscience company is that studying human consciousness has been the hardest thing to do because we're immersed in our own consciousness. But any of those practices, whether it's rapid holotropic breathing or other breathing practices, fasting, plant medicines, even things like certain drumming circles, all of those can take you to a place that is abnormal. Because frankly, normal means average. And if you want to be a high performing human being, you better be willing to go to a place that's not average. So experiencing different abnormal states, as long as they're not permanently harmful abnormal states, is good. Likewise, try taking an ice bath. You'll go to some crazy places sitting in an ice bath for the first time, getting a strong signal from your body that says, I am going to die. And you going, shut up, you can do 3 minutes or 20 minutes, or whatever it is. And that argument, that wrestling between your conscious, adult, human, rational mind and the animal, emotional, spiritual side of you that says one thing is true and you saying another thing is true. The reality is usually somewhere in the middle. And so my practice of fasting in a cave, my practice of plant medicine, my practice of neurofeedback and breathing and all of the things that I've done, and I'm very blessed to be friends with some of the leaders in personal development. Um, all of those just serve to say there's different layers of awareness that you can have, and that being able to tap into those makes you a better human being. But denying their existence based on the idea that you've been taught they can't exist, that doesn't seem to serve you very well, because the type of creation that I do in the world, changing the language around health. Like how many times you heard hack your health or upgrade your biology? I did that, right? We really have changed the level of control that we all believe that we have over ourselves, that it's now okay to assert control over your body, whereas before it was sort of like you just wanted to be thin, but it was more like you were a victim of the food. And so we now are way more in charge of ourselves. That kind of stuff, that's a personal development practice, right? And now the challenge is you could meditate for 2 hours a day for the rest of your life. I just don't have 2 hours a day. I have companies to run. I have kids to be with. I have a wife. I have friends. I have a community. I have a farm. Like maybe instead of meditating, I could feed the sheep, right? So all of those things, how do you get the progress in the least amount of energy and time required to continue growing as a human? I am 100% certain, and why I wrote this book is that when you take up regular intermittent fasting without a spiritual practice, you will have a quantum jump in the amount of energy available to you for your brain. And you'll have enough energy to be curious and enough energy to explore the boundaries of what you find are true. And this is why fasting is so important. It's the power that you get. And you will just, as a natural human being, you're curious. We all want to come to this next level. And this ties back to Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. A lot of people have heard of this. and that, oh, we need food and shelter and safety and love and things like that. What almost no one knows, and what I didn't know, is that right before he died at 62, is Abraham Maslow had written up the final step of the hierarchy of human needs. It was for transcendence, to be connected to the world around you. And the guy who discovered this in his writings is named Scott Barry Kaufman, who is a guest on Bulletproof Radio. I think he's at Columbia, one of the big universities. And I believe that this is just part of it. We just don't have the power to get to the next level if we eat all the time or if we eat the wrong stuff all the time. And that's why intermittent fasting matters, because it will give you the power to choose your path to become a better, more evolved human being. It's that big of a deal. And that's why it's worth a book. And that's why it's worth the time it takes to read it. This is not a book that says step one, don't eat, step two, it's good for you. We know these to be true. How do you do it? How do you do it in a busy life? And when you choose to use it as a spiritual practice, how do you do that? And it's just a different thought process than, oh, just do something that's good for you. Like, you can tell people to exercise every day, it's good for them. A, it probably isn't if it's heavy exercise. And B, only 8% of people will do it anyway because it's not pleasant. I want to make intermittent fasting more pleasant than having breakfast. And I think I've done it.
Let's come full circle on the cave story. You leave the cave after 4 days. You're by yourself. You only have water. What's it like coming back into society after that point? And how are you a different person?
Well, the first thing that happens, I was lit up with energy, like crazy levels of energy. And during this fast, I had a cell phone. This was before smartphones were a thing. There was no Instagram. And so what I would do is every morning I would turn on my phone for a minute and text the shaman and say, I'm okay. And she'd text back if there was anything that I needed, to do, or like if something weird had happened. Like, there's a nuclear war or something, I have to come pick you up. So I usually didn't receive anything. But she said, okay, I'll come pick you up. And I'm going to pick up another person who's fasting in a different cave somewhere. And I said, "Oh, don't worry, I can just walk." And it's several miles the other cave. I'm like, "I can just walk." And she's like, "I don't think you should." I'm like, "No, I'm ready." And I was just like just a ball of energy. So I had a canteen full of water and I put on my backpack. It's not that heavy. There's no food in there. There's just a backpack and a jacket. And I start walking. Okay. Now I thought I knew which mountain I was heading for. I was wrong. So I'm like, there's weird. There's no trail up here. I just can't find the trail. So I climb to the top of a mountain and I get there and there's no cave there where I thought there would be. I'm like, oh man, this isn't good. And my phone's almost out of battery. So I'm, I'm sort of texting going, where are you guys? And she's like, great. Now you're lost in the desert. This is fantastic. So I ended up, oh, I think I can see a road over there. So I just cross country through the desert, rattlesnakes and whatever else, cactus. And zero lack of energy, zero fear, even zero dehydration. I still had water left, and I haven't grown up in the desert. I'm like, at a certain point, you run out of water in the desert. It's going to suck. But I have so much energy. It was hard to explain. Okay, how is it that I can walk like 10 miles in the heat without any food for 4 days? Like, I was blowing myself out of the water, right? And then come back and have some sort of a meal. I don't think I even remember how I broke the fast. It was probably some sort of a juice thing or something. I just have no recollection. And then the next day it's drive to the airport and start to go back. But it does take a couple days where you're just like, wow, I remember the feeling of energy and power that I had. Remember the sort of the spiritual experiences. Anytime you do intense personal development, whether it's ayahuasca, whether it's like the neurofeedback path, that is my favorite, whether it's even a heavy duty holotropic experience, it usually takes 2 to 4 days to ground yourself back in reality. Like, I remember one time as I was developing the 40 years of Zen work, I had spent 7 days doing really intense, deep neurofeedback work. I went to all these crazy spiritual places and I started a new job the next day. So I come into work and I'm like only halfway in reality. And one of the people I was starting to work with, she comes up, she goes, "Do you meditate?" And I go, "Actually, yeah, I do. Why?" She goes, "You have this look in your eyes like my guru from India." And I was like, oh my God, like, what do my eyes look like? Like, I'm not trying to do that. I don't want to be a guru. But I was just like so altered. It like took my brain a couple days. And I felt similar to that after fasting. And like, it's okay. If you're going to go to somewhere strange and that's not what you normally do, it's okay to adjust when you come back. But what I did find when I came back is that that feeling of I'm going to die if I don't eat, it was gone. Because I realized I showed my cells that they weren't going to die if they didn't eat. And I'd lost crazy amounts of weight when I was doing that, which wasn't my intent at all. It just naturally happened. But my metabolism worked better. Like my eyes were brighter. And it was really good. It was good for my relationship at home too. I had about a 1 year old during that time, and it was it was just a generally good thing. I think everything in my life got better after that.
Well, speaking of kids, when it comes to fasting, can kids ever fast? And if they can, at what age would you say it's safe?
Younger children shouldn't fast, but you shouldn't force them to eat either. So they are very self-guided. I learned as a parent that every time my kid said, I don't want that food, they were right. Now, it's different if your kids say, I only want to eat the French fries. But if I'd served them the foods that they liked, here's some grass-fed steak, here's some broccoli. I'm like, I don't want the broccoli tonight, Daddy. And if I'd say, shut up and eat your broccoli, I'm like, oh, that's funny. All of us felt like crap the next morning because that broccoli actually wasn't good. It had, it's called Alternarium brassica. It's a type of mold that grows on brassica family. And all of us slept poorly and like didn't feel good. And the kids were cranky. And we all wanted dessert, which means we ate a food toxin. They knew. And so kids have a really good self-guidance that also can be like candy, candy, candy. But if you teach your kids not to eat candy and you teach your kids they don't get to pick what the food is and you put out food that they normally eat and they don't want to eat it, like, okay, that's fine. My daughter who's 13, she's like, Daddy, I really don't like having breakfast. Like, I just don't like when I'm home, I don't want to eat anything until noon. And I'm like, that's great. You don't have to. Right. But if she did when she was 6, I'd say, let's wait a couple hours and you can have something. But because we are wired as parents to feel as if our children are us, our energy field is actually extended out and our children are a part of our energy field. It's stronger for mothers, but it's also there for dads. And we're holding them in our energy. Right. So when we feel like our children might be starving, what was that about the survival of the species? Okay. That's in there. And every parent on earth will take their last bite of food and give it to their kid if it's actual starvation. So when we feel our children might be starving, we do what the stereotypical parents do. Oh, here, eat, eat, eat. And it sets our children up for failure. So what I do in my house is, hey guys, um, this is, I guess, when they were younger, they don't do it anymore. But my son's like, Daddy, I'm not going to eat this. I just don't want to eat this tonight. And it was whatever the broccoli was or whatever. And this wasn't a case of the broccoli was good. It was just, asserting control. Uh, and I said, oh, that's awesome, Alan. You've decided to join me in an intermittent fast. We won't starve to death for about 60 days. So we can just put the food back in the fridge and we both won't eat. And then he looks at me and then he eats his dinner. Right. So that you're not going to starve if you don't get the candy is a big thing. Also, don't feed your kids candy anyway. But should you force a kid to fast? Never. If a child's curious about fasting, I think it's fine for them to do it. And I relay the story in the book. My son was probably 9 at the time. He's 11 now, maybe even 8. But we've been talking about fasting a lot. And I said, oh, I'm going to fast for a couple days. And he'd seen me do it a few times. And he said, Daddy, I've decided I want to try fasting for 24 hours. And I said, really? Okay. You're not allowed to fast regularly because you're too young for that. You want your body to know that we live in a land of abundance and that it's safe to grow and, become as strong as it possibly can be because there's no limitation on resources. But yeah, you can fast. And I said, you might want to have a little bit of black coffee. My kids drink coffee. They always have because coffee is good for you and kids metabolize caffeine quite well. They just, they get half a cup in the morning. That's fine. And so you might want to have some coffee because it'll make it so you're less hungry. And he goes, no, I actually want to feel the fast so that I know what it's like. So I don't want to try any of the fasting hacks. I'm just going to do it. And he did it. And, it was a great act of willpower for him, but he was showing himself who was in charge. And it was amazing. And when he finally broke his fast, he goes, Daddy, you're right. Fasting really is the best spice. This is the best meal I've ever had. And since then, he hasn't wanted to fast. Every now and then, say, I don't want breakfast. That's fine. Right. So we don't force them to eat, but we don't encourage them to fast. We don't allow them to fast. The same is true for teenagers. Look, if a teenager wants to intermittent fast several times a week, that's fine. But you need to have a protein breakfast the other days. If you're working out that day, if they're in track or whatever, then they eat a protein and fat breakfast. and they're not allowed to go out and exercise a lot, because a lot of teenagers, especially girls, they'll get to that like, oh, I'm just not going to eat very much. I'm going to do all the things I do, and they don't have the wiring to be aware of their state to realize, oh, I'm acting the way I'm acting, and I can't focus because I either don't have the right nutrients or because I'm not eating enough. So I think it's important that you don't over encourage that, and that my kids, if they want to intermittent fast every day, I'd say no. But if they want intermittent fast 3-4 days a week, fine. But my kids are now 11 and 13, and they're getting to that point. And when they were younger, no way. Um, you guys eat lunch and dinner and usually breakfast. The other thing about kids, they do not need to eat 6 times a day. They might need to eat 4 times a day. They might need to eat 3 times a day. And my daughter came home from first or second grade, and she said, Dave, or not Dave, she said, Daddy, as soon as I get to school, the teachers start talking about our snack. And we get there, and then all the other kids are hungry, but I don't even want to eat. Don't the other kids have breakfast? And I said, "Well, Anna, go ask them what they have for breakfast." And she comes back, she says, "Oh, my vegan friend has a green apple for breakfast." I'm like, "Anna, if you had a green apple, would you be hungry?" And she goes, "Yes." And I said, "Well, there you go. They're eating the wrong breakfast, so then they feel like they need to eat 2 hours later." And she says, "I wish the teacher wouldn't make me eat a snack because I really don't want the snack. I'm full until lunch." So she would like fake eating a snack that she didn't want. Okay, this is what happens. You feed children enough of the right fats and the right protein. What's you having for breakfast? Smoked salmon from Costco, wild caught smoked salmon, which is good, and avocados, right? Or bacon and eggs, right? Or other things like that that are rich in fat and rich in protein. And then they're satiated. And as a parent, what this does for you, Jesse, you get enough interruptions from children because they don't have filters. If the interruption is, can I have candy? Can I have candy? Can I have candy? I'm hungry, 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 hungry. Man, it's exhausting for parents. It's exhausting for kids. And when you feed them right, they don't do that. So it's more about the right food and permission to skip a meal, but not regularly skipping a meal. Long answer, but I think it's a really important nuance for parents.
Definitely important. And earlier, Dave, you quickly touched on differences when it comes to fasting between men and women. Is there any further depth you want to go into on that, and special considerations when it, because I know you talk about in the book how a lot of the research is actually done on men. So with your experience, what have you found can help women along the way?
Well, only about 25 to 35% of studies of fasting even account for women. And the reason for this is that throughout most of medical research, the cheapest human guinea pigs are college freshmen, and college freshmen were predominantly white dudes. Now it's shifted. There's actually more women in college than men. But because we'd experiment on them, you pay them $10 and they'll do anything you want. So they would run these crazy things on men. And the research on women definitely shows that they are less resilient to fasting than men, but that it's profoundly good for them. And this goes, in fact, there's a whole chapter in the book focusing just on the research for women and the hormone changes. And one of the biggest things for women is when you're right in the middle of your cycle, you're menstruating, you already have a biological stressor right now. Your body is working on rebuilding tissues. You are unlikely to get the results from fasting on those days. Then being kind to yourself, having protein, having fat, having some carbohydrates later in the day, which is going to give you the energy and the building blocks your body needs to rebuild the lining of your uterus. And if instead you're saying, oh, I'm just going to fast, well, why does it not work now, but it worked other times? It's because women have times of the month when they're highly focused and high performance, and they have times of the month where they're less performant. And Olympic athletes I've interviewed on the show talk about this. They're saying, oh, I know that if I have a competition during my cycle, I'm less likely to win because my body's busy on doing other stuff. Right. So the same goes for fasting. So fasting during menstruation is usually not a good idea, even the day after. Or if you're going to do it, a shorter intermittent fast, or ideally doing it with bulletproof coffee. So at least you've got the ketones in the body, you've got some building blocks, you've taken a load off, but you're still allowing the protein digestion and repair systems to work. So that's the biggest thing for women. And also just don't overfast. Guys can fast more than women and get away with it and actually benefit from it. And so for women, especially if you have weight to lose, start out 3 or 4 days a week doing intermittent fasting and start out with the fasting hacks. And over time, as your body becomes stronger and leaner and your mitochondria become better at burning fat, you might say, oh, I'm going to do it 5 days a week. but it's okay to have breakfast like you do on weekends. Breakfast does not mean the Denny's Grand Slam with all the bad fats and all that. And way back in the day when I was fat, I'd be super clean during the week, but I knew we had to have a cheat meal every day. And Tim Ferriss, who I respect a lot, has been on my show a few times. In the 4 Hour Body, he talks about kind of having a cheat day. What I found over many cheat days as a younger person was that the cravings and the inflammation that those would induce, that they lasted for several days and caused way more suffering than it was worth. So now the cheat day might be, I eat a lot more carbs, right? But these are carbs that are not going to leave a residue of inflammation. I don't eat bad fats. I don't eat, chicken McNuggets on a cheat day. That would be ridiculous. So you still keep it clean, but you're having a lot more carbs and it's very enjoyable, delicious food. And that's an important thing for women, even more important than men. When you do, when you're not fasting, it's okay to have carbs. If you want to be in keto, do it for a week or two and then go out, allow the parts of your body that need carbs to do it, reduce the biological stress, and then go back in. It's the cycles instead of just like, I'm going to push and never stop pushing. So that's the biggest finding in the chapter for women. If you're looking to upgrade everything about your life, make sure to check out the video right here. And while you're at it, hit subscribe below.